Well, you know, the Wayne County Jail project continues to be a massive problem for County Exec Bob Ficano, though he says there's been interest from international investors for the property where the project has been halted. County auditors are now looking at the finances. All right, Nolan, where are we with all of this?
That's just a crock of garbage. I mean, that's more Ficano's spin. There's not interest in that property, not for the price he thinks he's going to get it. Bob Ficano has wasted $120 million on this jail, and he's looking for somebody to come along and give him $120 million for property that's worth half of that at most, and maybe a quarter of that amount. He was looking for somebody to bail him out so he could do what he should have done in the first place, and then it is take that complex along with the courts over to the abandoned Mound Road prison, join the city of Detroit lockup over there, and get the whole mess and all those orange jumpsuits out of downtown Detroit. This business about international investors, if he's got them, he should put their name on the table. He's trying to whipsaw Dan Gilbert, who he thought was going to write him a check, and Gilbert says, you know, I may buy the property, but I'm not going to wipe away your political embarrassment here by paying more than it's worth. This is just a despicable mess.
Despicable mess?
Well, I mean, I think that, well, for starters, there's a reason that we're not building the jail over at Mound Road to begin with, which is that this is not just the jail, but this was going to be the sort of central lockup for all of Wayne County. And so you were going to get rid of jails in some other communities and concentrate them in one place. Well, you needed to do that someplace where you have access to a lot of freeways. That's why the site that they're on was one that they were thinking about, and the other site that they really thought about was the old Tiger Stadium site, which would also have been a disaster. I'm not saying that you want jails in those places, but for what they're trying to do, you need a certain kind of location, which Mound Road didn't fit. Now, that doesn't excuse the fact that they've blown $120 million.
It's where they're going to end up, and they're going to make it fit. I mean,
you don't. It may not.
Think
serve
of other
that
cities
then.
And whether they have jails in the heart of their downtown.
Well, sure. I mean,
this is another Turkia Mullen, you know, stinky mess. I mean, you get to the bottom of this, and you've got the same sort of bad decision making and cronyistic deals that led to the county losing $26 million at Pinnacle Racecourse, $27 million at the Guardian Building, and nobody is really talking about it.
There's no argument that they screwed it up. I'm saying that the citing decision was not about corruption. That was about.
You can't say that with any confidence at this point.
I think
Mound Road is going to work for the city of Detroit. The state offered them a plan that will allow them to take the courts.
It will work for the jail. It will not work to absorb populations of these other jails because it's just an inconvenient location. That's why it wasn't chosen.
Well, where was all this heated discussion back when the decision was made?
Well, that's the point.
It
was not.
And the business community went nuts, and nobody else paid attention to them. There's plenty of ingress and egress out of that Mound Road state. If the state used it for a prison, why on earth can't the county use it?
Because you're not transferring prisoners in and out of
once they're in, they're in. You're looking at
the prison's different from a jail.
If you move your courts as well, which is what the state was suggesting they do, then you have less of that.
No, it's not the courts. It's the other jails. It's like the Dearborn jail, the lockups downriver.
They were going to close those anyway, Steve.
No, they weren't. They were going to close those to move to the site downtown.
Exactly, and they could do the same thing at Mound.
A lot harder. The reason they chose where they were was because that's a lot more accessible place.
The reason they chose where they were, it was
it's right across the street from the current jail.
Sweetheart contracting and payoffs.
That's always part of the deal. Yeah, no, I agree.
Another cronyistic Wayne County mess.
So no one has a bid on the property right now. We've got nothing.
Well, but see, I also think it's a mistake to undervalue that property. If you're not going to build a jail there, it's pretty prime real estate.
Right for something.
Cross street from Ford Field, near Greektown Casino. You could have something great there.
Steve. I mean,
well, it's not worth that.
The Gilbert people figure it's worth between 30 and 60 if they can find other uses for the building.
Well,
and
that's going to be painful for the taxpayers.
The jail site itself wasn't worth the $15 million the county paid for it in the first place, in which Charlie Williams got a $400,000 finder.
Right. But the other possibility here is,
go ahead, Stephen.
You know, if you can tear down Frank Murphy and move that out to Mound Road and the old jail, now you're talking about a very big site right on the edge of downtown. Right. You can do something really special.
And you got to make sure you got planners in place that are going to make sure that they're using it in the best possible way, too. All right, well, let's move on. Big decisions out of the Supreme Court this week that impact gay marriage. Here in Michigan, there is a ban against same-sex marriage, but there are already conversations in Lansing to talk about ending the ban. So what are the conversations, Stephen, that's going on right now?
Well, I mean, I think you've got activists on certainly the pro-gay marriage side talking about whether they can get a ballot initiative together for 14 or for 16. What I understand is that they don't think they'll have the money or the organization to get it on the 14 ballot. So it will probably be 2016. But meanwhile, you have two other avenues that are working. One is the legislature, where there's going to be bills introduced to put it on the ballot, which the legislature can do. And then you've got this court case in Judge Friedman's courtroom in downtown Detroit, where he has said that the central question about this adoption case that landed in his court is whether the ban on gay marriage is constitutional. And I suspect that given what the court's language was like this week, what the rulings look like, he could very, very likely say this is an unconstitutional infringement of people's liberty.
And
yeah,
the
that could change everything here.
Supreme Court ruling would seem to pave the way for that. I would think the remedy in Michigan would more likely come in the courts. I don't think this decision in this case is going to legalize gay marriage, but it may very well remove that ban, because if you look at the way Justice Kennedy wrote that decision, I mean, he did very correctly say marriage law is a matter for the states to determine and for each states to decide. But then he also invoked the Equal Protection Clause.
Right.
And, you know, it's hard to see how they're going to tolerate a situation where the federal government discriminates in one state and doesn't discriminate in another state. You know, I think the inconsistency there is going to lead ultimately to the change in Michigan.
As someone who covered the Supreme Court, Stephen, what were your thoughts this week as you saw everything come down?
Well, you know, I mean, you've got Justice Kennedy. This is the third opinion he's written for the court in the last decade that really takes, you know, a broad swipe at efforts to single out gay couples because they are gay. I mean, this is something that really offends him personally and really offends his notion of constitutional liberty. I think there's no question that you know, third time is a charm in this case, and that it's just going to be very difficult going forward for anybody to pass legislation or even constitutional amendments in their states that treat gay people differently because they're gay.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine going out. You're going to have a situation where marriage is legal in some states and not legal in the other states. Yeah. Clearly, the court's not going to allow it to be illegal. So, I mean, it's hard not to see this thing coming to a conclusion.
Some change here. All right, Senate Republicans say Medicaid expansion in Michigan is not dead, despite the lack of the vote last week. A GOP work group has been formed by Senate Majority Leader Randy Richardville to study it. So has Mr. Richardville and Mr. Snyder, have they made up a little bit?
Well, I don't know if they've made up. Richardville's going to ask for some changes. I think the governor's going to give it. I talked to both of them last week. Both of them downplayed their feud,
the drama,
if you will, and I believe they'll come back sometime in the fall, either in August when they return at the start of the session, or sometime early on, and get this thing done. They're going to build in some protections that allow the Republicans who are worried about the cost exploding. They're going to build in some protections, whether they mean anything or not, in the end, to allow them to cast votes for it.
All right, so there's no vote next week, I think, is what the governor.
Yeah, unfortunately, there won't be. I mean, you know, this is a loss for the governor, as I see it. I mean, it's a sign of his inability to control his own caucus. It's also a sign that he's made deals in the past with people who've stabbed him in the back. Going forward, I think you gotta treat the whole thing differently.
That's a classic overstatement.
Well,
this is the political process. This is the way politics works. You've got a strong governor and you've got strong legislative leaders. You're going to have this sort of clashes. But in the end, what will happen here is what always happens. They'll get a compromise deal. You compare that with what we went through for 8 years, where we got no deal.
No one's saying
compromise deal depends how painful it is to each side, though.
No one's saying that was better. But the reason that Jennifer Granholm couldn't get anything done was because she had opposition from. No, hold on. She never had control of. He's got control of the governor's office and both houses of the legislature, and he can't get his own agenda.
You should be encouraged that it's not a rubber stamp, that there is tension, that there is a process.
Please, this is about somebody who's not a strong leader. This is a guy who's not proven to be a strong leader
This guy's got
in the
more
legislature.
done in 2.5 years than we got done in 8. So
he got done what they wanted to get
He's a
done.
plenty strong leader in terms of the changes he's put in place.
This is a guy who said
Look at
stuff
what we've
was
done
not
here in 2.5
right,
years.
and the things that he said were not on his agenda. He let them take control of, and the stuff that he wants to get done.
All
they're
right,
now
and we shall
on his
see.
agenda up to this point. I mean, you sat here and a lot of people said, "Well, gosh, he's not a leader. He can't get a bridge built." Well,
And we shall see.
bridge? Where's the bridge?
Let's see
There's no
how
bridge.
it all works out in the fall. Gentlemen, have a great weekend. That's going to do it for My Week. Thanks so much for joining us. Go to myweek.org for any shows that you might have missed. Take care. We'll see you next week.